I live near the edge of a national forest, the kind of place where the suburbs thin out and the mountains start pressing back. I've hiked those trails for years. I know the switchbacks, the dry creek beds, the fallen logs that have been there so long they feel permanent. It's the only place I've ever felt like my thoughts could spread out without echoing. The night this happened, I shouldn't have gone out. I'd gotten a call earlier that evening. Bad news about someone I loved. The kind of news that rearranges the air in your lungs and makes your house feel too small. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't stare at the walls. So I did what I always do when I feel like I'm suffocating. I grabbed my boots, my small pack, and my flashlight. It was already dark when I reached the trailhead. A thin mist hung between the trees. Not thick enough to be called fog yet, but enough to blur the edges of things. The parking lot was empty. That didn't surprise me. Night hiking isn't popular, but I've always preferred it. The forest feels honest at night. No distractions, no tourists, just you and whatever's actually there. I started down the main trail with my headphones in, low music playing, not to drown anything out, just to keep wildlife at a comfortable distance. The air was cool and damp. My breath made faint clouds in front of me. About 20 minutes in, the mist thickened. It crept in slowly, like something deliberate. One minute I could see the curve of the trail ahead. The next, everything beyond 20 feet was swallowed in gray. My flashlight didn't help much. The beam scattered in the moisture and reflected back into my eyes, turning the world into a glowing wall, so I turned it off and let my eyes adjust. The forest became a collection of silhouettes, tree trunks like dark pillars, branches like ribs overhead. The ground was still visible enough to follow. I'd walked this path dozens of times. I could do it half asleep. About an hour in, I smelled something that didn't belong. It wasn't the usual scent of wet pine or soil. It was floral, sweet, subtle, but distinct, like someone had walked past me wearing perfume and left a trail in the air. I stopped. The forest didn't react. No snapping twigs, no shifting leaves. The smell faded as quickly as it came. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a plant I wasn't familiar with. Maybe someone had passed through earlier in the evening. Scent lingers. I kept walking. 10 minutes later, a new smell drifted in. Smoke. Not heavy like a wildfire, just faint campfire smoke. That unsettled me more than the perfume. There aren't many legal camping spots off that section of trail, and I hadn't passed anyone on the way in. The fog should have carried the smell consistently if there was a fire nearby, but it pulsed in and out like someone was opening and closing a door. Then came the third smell. This one hit me in the chest. It was sharp, metallic. Underneath it was something earthy and wrong. It stirred a memory I couldn't fully grab. Something from childhood. Something I didn't want to revisit. I knew that smell. It was blood. My pulse quickened. I turned slowly in a circle, scanning the fog. Nothing moved. The trees stood exactly as they had before. That's when I saw the light. Up on the ridge to my right, maybe 100 feet above the main trail, a thin beam flickered on. It cut through the fog in a tight arc, sweeping slowly across the slope. Then it clicked off. A few seconds later, it appeared again, farther down the ridge. There are no marked trails up there. The terrain is steep and unstable. Even in daylight, it's difficult to climb. Yet someone was moving up there with confidence. I pulled out my phone and paused my music. The sudden silence pressed against my ears. I stood still and listened. At first, nothing. Then, faintly, a whistle. It wasn't a tune I recognized, just a slow, wandering pattern of notes. Casual, almost absent-minded. If I could hear it, they definitely heard my music earlier. The beam flicked on again, closer this time. It wasn't searching randomly, it felt like it was tracking. I told myself I was being dramatic. People hike at night. Maybe someone had found a way up there I didn't know about. Maybe they were just enjoying the fog like I was. But the whistling never changed pace. It didn't hesitate. It didn't falter, like it knew exactly where I was. There was a small overlook ahead, an open slab of rock that jutted out from the mountainside. I decided I'd go there, clear my head, and turn back. When I reached it, the fog thinned slightly, revealing the flat stone at the center of the overlook. Something sat on it. A small arrangement of rocks, stacked carefully into a narrow tower. Not random, deliberate. I hadn't seen it before. I stepped closer. At the base of the stacked stones were objects half hidden in the mist. Twigs bound together with thin cord. Something dark smeared across the surface of the rock. The metallic smell grew stronger. My chest tightened. The whistling stopped. Not faded, stopped. I turned around slowly. Footsteps exploded from the direction I'd come. fast, heavy, human. They pounded against the dirt and stone, closing the distance in seconds. I didn't have time to run. I pulled the small knife from my pocket and braced myself. The footsteps came right up to me, and then ceased. No sliding stop, no shifting gravel, just silence. My heart hammered so loudly I thought it would drown out anything else. I stared into the fog where the sound had ended. Nothing. If someone had rushed me, they would be standing right there. But I couldn't see a shape, couldn't hear breathing. I took one cautious step forward. The fog swallowed it. I whispered, "Who's there?" The forest gave nothing back. Then, somewhere behind me, the whistling resumed. Not on the ridge, on the trail. I spun around. The sound was closer now, lower, more focused. It moved slightly to the left, then the right, circling. I began walking back down the trail, every muscle rigid. Each step felt like stepping into water I couldn't see beneath. The fog thickened again, turning the world into a featureless corridor. Behind me, I heard it. One extra step. I stopped. The sound stopped. I started walking. One extra step followed, perfectly timed. I didn't turn around again. I didn't want to confirm what I already suspected, that someone was close enough to match my pace exactly. The crashing came without warning. Bushes erupted to my left. Branches snapped. Something large barreled through the undergrowth, parallel to the trail. I broke. I ran. The forest blurred into streaks of gray and black. My boots slammed against roots and stones. I didn't care if I fell. I didn't care if I twisted an ankle. Behind me, the crashing followed. Not random. Purposeful. Keeping pace. The whistling was gone now, replaced by harsh breathing and the unmistakable rhythm of someone sprinting. I didn't look back. The trail felt twice as long as it had before. Every bend looked unfamiliar. Every tree looked like a figure waiting to step out. The crashing got closer. A hand brushed the back of my jacket. I screamed and pumped my legs harder. The parking lot came into view like a hallucination. Two faint reflective signs glowing in my headlights' memory. I lunged for my car, fumbled the keys, nearly dropped them. The crashing burst from the tree line just as I yanked the door open and threw myself inside. I slammed the lock down and looked up. The fog drifted across the lot. The tree line stood still. No one emerged, no footsteps, no whistling, just the quiet hum of my own ragged breathing. I started the engine and peeled out of the lot without looking back. When I got home, I realized something. The metallic smell was still faintly on my hands, and there was dried blood under my fingernails that wasn't mine. I haven't been back to that trail since. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind pushes through the trees behind my house just right, I hear a faint whistle drifting in from the dark. Slow, wandering, waiting. I grew up believing our house was safe. It sat in the middle of a quiet suburban street lined with trimmed hedges and identical mailboxes. The kind of neighborhood where kids biked in lazy circles and porch lights flicked off at the same time every night. Nothing dramatic ever happened there. That was the whole appeal. Our house had 3 stories. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, facing the street. Directly above me on the 3rd floor was my dad's office. It also had a single window facing the street. Those 2 windows, mine and his, were the only ones on the front of the house. That detail didn't matter to me growing up. Now it's the only detail that does. The first strange thing happened when I was too young to understand it. I remember coming downstairs early one weekend morning and hearing my parents arguing in hushed voices in the kitchen. My dad kept saying it happened again, and my mom sounded like she was trying not to panic. When I asked what they were talking about, they brushed it off. I didn't learn the truth until years later from my older brother. Dad had been working late in his office when he noticed a black SUV crawling down the street. Not driving slowly, crawling. It passed our house, then came back the other way. Then it parked directly across from us. It didn't turn off its headlights at first. They stayed on, illuminating our house like a stage. Dad watched for several minutes. No one got out. No interior lights flicked on. The engine idled. Finally, the headlights switched off. The vehicle remained. Dad said he kept glancing at it while he worked. Every time he looked up, it was still there. Around 2 in the morning, exhausted, he fell asleep at his desk. When he woke up just before dawn, the SUV was still parked in the same spot. No condensation on the windows, no door opening, no movement, just there. It left just before sunrise. At the time, my parents convinced themselves it was nothing. Someone lost, someone resting, someone with harmless intentions. But it happened again months later, and then again the next year. Always late at night, always idling across from our house, never during the day. When I was 15, I experienced something myself. I was up late making music in my room. My desk faced the window, so I always had a clear view of the street. Around midnight, I noticed a faint flicker of light. At first, I thought it was a passing car. Then I realized the light was moving deliberately. 3 cars rolled down the street in a line, creeping at a walking pace. From inside the first car, a flashlight beam swept across the houses. It paused at each driveway, each front window. When the beam reached our yard, my chest tightened. I ducked instinctively. A second later, light flooded my ceiling. It lingered, slowly drifted across the room, then vanished. I stayed crouched beneath the window for nearly a minute before daring to look again. The cars had reached the end of the street and turned off together. The next morning, my parents took it seriously. Cameras were installed, motion lights mounted. The conversation about the SUV resurfaced. For a while, nothing happened. Then a landscaper found a camera in our backyard. It was tiny, hidden deep inside a bush near the fence line. Not pointed at the house exactly, but angled to capture the back door and most of the yard. It had no memory card, no SIM card, just a dead battery. My dad theorized that someone had been close enough to receive a live feed while it was active, which meant they had been nearby, watching. We combed through our security footage but found nothing suspicious. Whoever placed it knew where our cameras couldn't see. After that, the air in the house changed. It wasn't panic, it was awareness. Every car that slowed down felt intentional. Every dog barking at night felt like a signal. Years passed again without incident. Then our next-door neighbors moved out. The new couple moved in quickly. Too quickly. No moving truck that I ever saw. Just one day the house was empty, and the next it was occupied. They were young, no kids. They kept to themselves. At first, nothing seemed wrong, until I started noticing them at their top floor window. Our houses were close enough that I could see silhouettes clearly from my bedroom. Late at night, one of them would stand there perfectly still, facing our yard. Not looking around, not using a phone, just standing, watching. I told myself they were just enjoying the view, but the view was our house. One evening while walking the dog, I glanced through their brightly lit kitchen window and saw them sitting at the table with a third person. He stood out immediately. Tall, broad-shouldered, completely bald, thick, dark eyebrows that made his expression look permanently intense. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't talking much either. He was just listening. As I walked past, the woman abruptly rose and closed the curtains. Not slowly, not casually, quickly, like she'd been alerted. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence, until the trip to Europe. My brother's girlfriend's family invited us to Paris. It was supposed to be celebratory, romantic, carefree. The first few days were normal: tourist attractions, cafes, long walks through crowded streets. One night, we were at a bar near the river. I was halfway through a drink when I glanced across the room. He was there, sitting alone in a booth, the bald man from my neighbor's kitchen. He wasn't dressed like a tourist. No map, no camera, just sitting, observing. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew this wasn't coincidence. He didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't look confused. He looked calm, aware. Then he stood and left without finishing his drink. I followed him outside, but he was gone. I told no one that night. I convinced myself I was spiraling, until I saw him again days later. We were visiting a famous monument, surrounded by tourists snapping photos. I felt the weight of someone staring at me and turned. He stood 50 feet away, holding a professional camera. The lens was angled slightly toward my family. I told myself it was pointed at the monument. But when I shifted, so did the camera. I felt it. He lowered the camera slowly, like he knew I'd noticed. Then he turned the corner and disappeared into the crowd. This time, I told my parents everything. To my surprise, they believed me. My dad's face drained of color as I described him. He didn't say much at first, then he admitted something. Years ago, before the SUV incidents began, he had taken on a case involving corporate espionage, high-profile, dangerous clients. He'd received subtle threats after winning the case. Nothing concrete, nothing provable, but enough to unsettle him. When we returned home, he reviewed months of security footage again. Still nothing obvious, but I started noticing small things. A car parked down the block for hours with no driver visible. Our trash bins slightly moved from where we'd left them. A package delivered that none of us ordered. Inside was nothing but packing paper. No note, no invoice, just emptiness. Last week, I woke up in the middle of the night for no reason. The house was silent. I glanced toward my window. Across the street, parked directly in front of our house, was a black SUV. Engine off, lights off. I went upstairs quietly and knocked on my dad's office door. He was already awake, standing at his window, looking down at it. We didn't say anything. We just watched. After several minutes, the driver's side door opened slightly. No one stepped out. The door remained ajar for a few seconds, then closed. The SUV started and drove away slowly. The next morning, we found something on our lawn, a small metallic object glinting in the sunlight. It was another camera, new, battery full. This one had a memory card. We didn't check what was on it. My dad handed it directly to the police. They took it seriously this time, but I haven't felt safe since, because whoever has been watching us for over a decade is patient. They don't rush, they don't break in, they don't make threats, they just observe. And the worst part is this: if they've been this careful for this long, they're not done.